The air in that room smelled like expensive lilies, imported linen, and the bitter aftertaste of being completely and utterly judged. They had cornered me by the mimosa bar. 3 women in designer dresses, their laughter brittle and sharp. They thought I was harmless. They thought my life was a cautionary tale to be whispered about over overpriced canapes. I felt the heat rising on my neck, the familiar flush of shame and powerlessness. But that day, something inside me didn't break. It hardened. I walked out of that perfect, poisoned bridal shower, got into my slightly dented sedan, and drove straight home. I didn't reach for a phone to scream or cry. I reached for my laptop. I knew I couldn't beat them in their world of diamond-encrusted perfection. But I realized I didn't have to. I had a different weapon. It was quiet, it was precise, and it had a billion-person reach. It was the truth, distilled into an essay that didn't name a single name, but still managed to shatter their reputations, one painful, viral paragraph at a time. The pen doesn't just write. Sometimes it rewrites power. Hello everyone, my name is Nora. I'm 28 years old, and I live in a beautiful, highly competitive suburb of a major city. I'm a writer, a struggling one, working primarily on grant proposals and corporate newsletters. The kind of writing that pays the rent but doesn't exactly light the soul on fire. If you have ever felt like you were standing outside a glass wall, watching a group of perfect people who have it all and feeling utterly dismissed and unworthy, you know the sting I'm talking about. If you've dreamed of turning your frustration into something powerful, something that actually serves justice, then you're in the right place. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let me tell you the story of how I turned my humiliation into a literary hand grenade. This isn't just about an essay. This is about finding your voice when you feel voiceless, and proving that substance always wins over superficial shine. So let's begin. The setting for this perfect storm was my best friend Chloe's bridal shower. Chloe and I have been inseparable since we were 8, but her life trajectory and mine had diverged wildly. She was marrying into serious old money, the kind of family that had its own wing at the local museum. The shower was held at the country club, in a ballroom that looked like a cloud made of silk and crystal. It was an event dripping with social hierarchy, and I, frankly, was at the bottom rung. I was there because I was Chloe's maid of honor, a token of her past life, tolerated only because she insisted. The lead antagonist was a woman named Charlotte. Charlotte was the unofficial queen bee of the perfect mother's clique. She was a stay-at-home socialite whose entire life was a performance. Immaculate designer clothes, a body that clearly cost thousands to maintain, and a perpetually exasperated yet poised expression. She was flanked by her 2 lieutenants, Veronica, whose entire identity was tied up in her husband's corporate title, and Brooke, the one who always laughed loudest at everyone else's expense. The injustice wasn't immediately apparent. It was a slow, subtle poison. They spoke to me with a kind of pitying sweetness, asking about my little apartment and little freelance projects. I tried to keep my focus on Chloe, but then the inevitable happened. I was standing alone, trying to look absorbed in a dish of fancy olives, when Charlotte approached, Veronica and Brooke in tow. "Nora, darling," Charlotte began, her voice a saccharine drawl. "Chloe told us you were doing the calligraphy for the table place cards. Such a quaint little hobby. Did you do all of them? Yes, I did, I replied, forcing a smile. It's a small passion project, and I loved doing something special for Chloe. Brooke piped up, her eyes wide and mock innocent. Oh, how frugal of Chloe. Our last shower, we flew in a calligrapher from New York. But I guess it's nice to keep things simple sometimes, isn't it? Veronica leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially, but making sure it was loud enough for everyone around to hear. We were just discussing the cost of motherhood with Chloe. Daycare, private school tuition, the au pair. It's a commitment. I mean, you're a writer, right, Nora? How do you manage that kind of pressure while still chasing the dream? The subtext was a fist to the gut. You are struggling. You are poor. You are not a real mother because you have to work a dream job that doesn't pay. I felt my cheeks burning. This was beyond gossip. It was a coordinated attack designed to showcase their own success by highlighting my perceived failure. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the olive I was holding. I manage, I said, my voice barely a whisper, by not spending $10,000 on a handbag. Brooke actually snickered. Charlotte just offered a pitying shake of her head. Oh, Nora, you must learn to appreciate the investment. Perfection is expensive, dear. But it's worth it. It's what keeps the right people around. They glided away then, leaving me standing there, feeling small, cheap, and utterly humiliated. I could feel every eye that had witnessed the interaction. It wasn't just my feelings they had trampled. They had mocked my financial reality, my work, and my worth as a mother. I fled the room. Not crying, but vibrating with a white-hot intense rage that was almost physical. My stomach twisted into a painful knot, and I felt a pulse throbbing right between my eyes. I didn't want to just yell at them. I wanted to dismantle them. I wanted to expose the fragile, expensive scaffolding that held up their entire lives. That was the breaking point. The moment the tears stopped, the resolve set in. They had the money, the houses, the clothes, but I had the words. And words, when wielded correctly, are the ultimate equalizer. I drove home and sat down in front of my laptop. I didn't plan for a week. I didn't outline. The essay poured out of me in a single, furious, 5-hour session. I wrote with a clarity I had never achieved in any paid assignment. The essay was titled, "The Real Price of Perfection, When Social Currency Trumps Human Worth." I wrote about the performance. I wrote about the anxiety beneath the perfect veneer. I wrote about the pressure to maintain a life that was purely for show, and how that obsession with appearances made people cruel, judgmental, and spiritually bankrupt. I opened the piece with an anecdote. I recently attended an event where the floral arrangements alone cost more than I earn in 2 months. I watched as 3 women, dressed in outfits worth more than my car, cornered a guest. They weren't gossiping about infidelity or crime. They were casually dissecting her financial situation, mocking her attempts at legitimate work, and using her struggle as a backdrop to boast about their own investments. They called their toxic judgment the price of perfection. I didn't name the women. I didn't name the event. I didn't name the town. I used veiled references, the wives of the regional banking executives, the mothers with matching Mercedes SUVs, the clique of curated excellence. I explored the deeper psychology. Why do people need to tear others down? Because their own facade is so fragile. If they acknowledged that my simple life could be happy, then their expensive life might be exposed as hollow. The goal of their perfection wasn't happiness, it was control. The essay was published that night on a major, well-respected online culture magazine I sometimes pitched to. They loved the raw, honest tone and the universality of the theme. I woke up the next morning to my phone buzzing so violently it was vibrating off the nightstand. It wasn't just viral, it was exploding. In 24 hours, 500,000 shares, 10,000 comments. It was picked up by the Huffington Post. Then the Today Show mentioned it. The essay was circulating in every chat group, every mommy blog, every professional forum. And in my town, in the highly competitive suburb where Charlotte reigned supreme, the essay wasn't just a critique of perfection, it was an indictment. I hadn't named names, but they had named themselves. Everyone knew the clique of curated excellence. Everyone knew about the expensive bridal shower at the country club. Everyone knew that Charlotte Thorne, Veronica Davies, and Brooke Sterling were the social arbiters who lived and breathed that exact brittle culture. The reaction was beautiful chaos. First, I got the texts, a torrent of frantic, thinly veiled threats and inquiries from numbers I didn't recognize. Nora, this essay, it's quite intense. People are wondering if it's about our group. You need to clarify this is fiction immediately, for Chloe's sake. A passive threat. I know you're upset about the calligraphy payment, but dragging people's lives through the mud is not okay. You need to stop this. Desperate, trying to anchor it to a petty, transactional dispute. I simply replied, the essay is about a universal cultural phenomenon. I stand by every word. No names were mentioned. I had used the absolute truth. And because it was the truth, I was bulletproof. If they publicly admitted the essay was about them, they would be confirming every single damning point I made. The climax came in the weeks following the essay's publication. The damage to their social currency was immediate and irreversible. Charlotte had planned a massive, expensive charity luncheon. She was trying to secure a huge donation from a major national foundation. The essay, however, had gone beyond the local bubble. It was now a cultural talking point about toxic female social culture. When the National Foundation head read an article linking the essay's author to Charlotte's social circle, they quietly pulled out. They didn't want to be associated with toxic social climbing. Then came the boycotts. Mothers who had always felt intimidated by the clique, who had been victims of their snubs and judgments, finally felt empowered. They started withdrawing their support from Charlotte's smaller events. The next PTA meeting Charlotte hosted had 6 attendees, a complete ghost town. The best moment came when I was invited to appear on a national morning show to discuss the viral success of The Real Price of Perfection. I sat there, polished and calm, discussing the psychological need for authenticity over performance. The host asked the million-dollar question, did this story happen to you? And wasn't about a specific group of women? I looked straight into the camera. The specific details are mine, I said. But the feeling is universal. It's about the pain of being judged for your lack of things. instead of being valued for your character. And I hope the individuals who saw themselves in the essay use this as a chance for genuine reflection, not defensiveness. That was my final crushing blow. By refusing to name them, I forced them to live in a hell of their own making. They were publicly shamed, but they had no one to sue, nothing concrete to deny, because they had to admit, yes, that essay about cruel, judgmental, materialistic women is about me. Their entire carefully constructed world, built on social proof and exclusion, collapsed. Their events were boycotted. Their invitations were refused. Their names were synonymous with the negative cultural critique I had written. Charlotte's husband reportedly lost a major deal because the client, citing reputation optics, decided to work with someone less associated with suburban drama. The pen didn't just write, it rewrote their power structure. My emotional release wasn't triumphant laughter. It was a deep, quiet sense of peace. That humiliation, that injustice I felt by the mimosa bar, had been fully cleansed. My validation didn't come from them finally respecting me. It came from the millions of readers who respected my truth. The essay didn't just change their lives, it changed mine. The magazine offered me a regular column. I got a book deal to expand on the theme. I didn't get rich overnight, but I became something far more valuable, authentic, and heard. Looking back, I realized what truly made the essay powerful wasn't my anger, but the honesty beneath it. When they mocked me, they were trying to define me by my income and my lack of perfection. But the truth is, their perfection was the most vulnerable thing they possessed. It was a lie that required constant, exhausting maintenance. I learned that the deepest, most satisfying form of justice is never loud. It's not a shouting match. It's a conversation. It's using your unique skill, whether it's writing, organizing, speaking, or painting, to illuminate the truth in a way that can't be ignored. They taught me a critical lesson that day. When people underestimate you, they are giving you the perfect advantage. They stopped watching me, thinking I was too weak or too small to matter. I was just the quiet writer, the one they relegated to the cheap calligraphy. But quiet writers observe, they process, and they wait for the perfect moment to publish. The real price of perfection, I found, was losing your credibility. And no amount of designer clothes or country club memberships can buy that back. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt the sting of being judged by someone who thinks they're superior, please hit that like button. My question for you is, what is the most powerful or unexpected way you've ever stood up to someone who underestimated you? Did you use silence? Did you use success? Did you use the written word? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about finding quiet strength and serving justice when you feel powerless, make sure you subscribe. Thank you for watching, and remember, don't chase perfection. Chase authenticity. End period.